Good afternoon, everybody. We are now live. If you would please take your seats, we will get started with our investiture ceremony. For those of you joining us virtually, thank you for joining us today. You're in store for the investiture of our new president, Kathleen Kennedy, and our class of 2021 directors. And with that, I'd like to introduce the chairwoman of the Texas Lyceum, hailing from Austin, Texas, Ms. Laura Dixon.
Thank you, Sarah. I look forward to being the chair, but we need to invest our new president first to make that happen. And that's what we're here to do today. So good afternoon and welcome to our investiture ceremony. I am Laura Dixon with Spur Sports and Entertainment in San Antonio and Austin. Austin's home for me. But like I mentioned at the conclusion, I will become the chair of the Lyceum. So I want to get that started. Let's get moving to get us headed down that path. In a traditional way, we've invited our friend Jennifer Sarver from the class of 2014 to lead us in an invocation. And then Sarah Jackson will come back and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thanks, Jen.
Pass down. Sure. Will you stand in prayer with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and the opportunity to gather in a country that allows us to be free to worship how we please. We thank you so much for the blessing of modern medicine and ask that you take care of those dealing with the results of this pandemic. We ask that we get vaccinated quickly, and those who are impacted by COVID and whose families have been impacted by COVID, that they continue to feel your hand in their life. Lord, as we come together today to celebrate the investiture of Kathleen Kennedy, we just ask your hand in her leadership of this organization. At this time in our country and in our state, when conversations are heated and our politics are polarized, what better time for an organization like the Texas Lyceum to be around? Let us understand that obligation. Let us take it seriously. Let us be leaders in civil discourse. And as we move forward individually, that we take the responsibility to engage our neighbors with love and with grace every day very seriously. I just ask you bless our time together, help this organization to make a difference in our communities and in our state. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
Please stand or remain standing for both the American Pledge and the Texas Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Texas Pledge. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Laura Dixon again to introduce our guests.
Thank you, Sarah. And thanks, Jen, again for starting us off in prayer. Normally, we would invest our new presidents and directors in the beautiful Texas Capitol with friends and family joining us and surrounding us with support. Today, we are here at the JW Marriott, and we're safe, and we're glad to see those who are here. And those who are joining us virtually, this is the first time we're live streaming our investiture ceremony, so welcome. There are three people I especially want to welcome through the virtual engagement, and those are directors that are in the class of 2021 that will be invested, who are just unable to be here in person. But Jennifer Chandler in Dallas, Mario Porras, and Angie Rosales, who are both in El Paso. You guys, we just want to thank you for participating virtually, and we look forward to being with you in person as soon as possible. And then before we swear in the new class, and invest our new president, I am delighted and honored to welcome to the podium the visionary founder of the Texas Lyceum, and he's also the past chair, Skipper Dipple. Skipper, please join us and do you want on this side?
Thank you, Laura. With y'all's permission, I'm going to remove this. Not only do you probably have a hard time hearing me through it, but more importantly, I think I'll blind myself as I talk. It's truly a pleasure to be here today. When we first started the Lyceum, there were a group of us. I was the founding chairman and president, but I would say that the founders were that whole first class because they represented a unique group of people from Texas. Today, I was asked to give some thoughts and ideas for the new inductees into the board, but also to give a little bit of the history, to give an idea of how the Lyceum evolved, what it really does, and the uniqueness of the organization. I sat down and dictated that. You have a copy, I think, that they presented that gave the ideas and the thoughts. But I also realized that two things. It was a lot longer than probably what would be my time limit here. And second, after 40 years, my legs don't hold out like they used to. So you're going to get the fairly brief executive summary of generally the concept of what's in that paper. But a lot of the things I refer to that I think will be important and of interest to you, you can pick up through it. I've also left a set of books that go back for basically six books of the Language of Conscience series, the last of which was Wisdom of Generations, that talks a lot about the Lyceum ideas that have been developed over 40 years. And I hope that each of the new inductees will find the one that is there. And any of the rest of you that would wish some of the other books that give a little of the history, please take them. That being said, when we first started the Lyceum 40 years ago, Texas was a lot like it is now and a lot different than now. We weren't a united state. El Paso was way out to the west. There was Dallas, there was Houston. Southwest Airlines was just beginning to connect us. We were very separated as a state. And one of the things when Texas Business asked some of us to come together to help them put on a conference, we looked to say the best thing we could do would be to try and design an organization that would help bring a degree of unity to Texas. To do that, we spent a lot of time thinking about things, and the first years trying a lot of things. There were political organizations, and they were very hot politics back then as Republicans were just emerging in Texas. There were economic organizations. We had 3 chambers of commerce. I was president of the state chamber that consolidated 3 at one point. But there were also a need for an organization that looked at leadership. That the core was, how do you build a leadership organization, not just for that organization, but could help in later years develop all of the things that were needed in Texas. We were a land that basically was of oil and gas, of real estate, trade with Mexico, cattle. George Kosmetsky was just bringing the ideas of computers to Austin. We sat down, and part of what we looked at is how do you keep organizations sustainable? And how do you unify people to bring them together? There are 3 powers that are primary powers: economics, politics, and culture. And those 3 all have unique characteristics. They work with each other. But they're very different in that economics and politics usually involve interests, where culture often involves values. So if we wanted to bring a variety of people together looking at the future of the state, we need to have it as a cultural organization based on values, primarily the stewardship to Texas. If we did that, then we needed to bring together a group that was of all of Texas. We tried to bring together different regions of the state, rural and urban, gender, race, political leanings, economic strata. We tried to bring all groups in, which made it difficult that you had a broad group of ranges that you had to find ways to meet with each other and talk with each other. You had to have the ability to learn. The Lyceum then designed itself as a leadership organization for the state. We worked with the John Ben Shepherd Forum, that the younger leaders, we were their mentors, and they gradually, many came into the Lyceum. Some of us formed an organization called the Texas Leadership Council. Basically, what it did was to pull together all of the different trade associations, many others, that looked at best practices in government. The LCRA was very key to funding it. So what you had was a group of people that could go on a leadership ladder in many ways throughout the state. And when you finished with the Lyceum, you took a range of friendships, of contacts, and you took them throughout the state in order that you could help in other areas. And people often looked at the Lyceum and said, well, does it take stands on things? Well, the case is, we looked very carefully at that. A lot of us, some were Democrats, some were Republicans, some were Democrats, switched to Republicans, some were independents. Nobody that came was not an activist. But this was an organization that was built on warriors' honor. You wanted people from all sides. Many of us, after the Lyceum, or even in conjunction with it, helped form the Texas Public Policy Foundation with Jim Leininger. Others worked with what is now Every Texan, that took a different approach in getting it done. Some of us helped form the Texas Health Institute with Camille Miller. We went in a variety of other type areas. We worked with the Texas Cultural Trust in basically building it. Many of us helped lead the transition to the Texas Chamber of Commerce and into the Texas Association of Business and Chambers of Commerce. In other words, all of the people were very much active on all different issues with organizations that took a position. The Lyceum, we found, was something that was much more important, because one of the issues at that point in time was education. I had chaired an organization called Texans for Quality Education. We had done a tremendous amount of research. One side in the politics said what we must have is equity, because in the Valley, many others, there needed to be more money in school districts. Others said you need quality education, particularly with technology, to have growth and to have jobs. You need to fund the universities. So you had often two sides being argued very differently, but you didn't have anyone pulling them together and doing the research to say, what is the best balance for the state, for the future, the common good as a whole? That what issues should the legislature be looking at, and what should it do? We didn't say you needed to do this. We pulled the information forward. And because of a lot of the leadership, we ended up having an impact. The first book, one that I did that is in there, called The New Legacy, Gib Lewis sent out to the legislature, but you had everybody in state government endorse it, Republican and Democrat. Not because it was a political book, not because it was an economic book. It was a cultural book on conscience versus convenience. In the three powers, you end up oftentimes that economics really ought to be interested in growth for everybody's pie being expanded. Often it becomes division of rich versus poor. Politics too often gets to be right versus left on the size and function of government, rather than a real understanding of what is probably best for the common good. Culture is very different. Culture is not good or bad because people stand in different places. Culture is conscience versus convenience. It is, do I care about the future and others, or do I care only about myself and now? The Lyceum was built on conscience. It was always to select, to try as best it could, people of conscience. It didn't expect you not to be an activist, probably in other places and directions, but it wanted to pull those ideas, those passions together, that we would have a chance to look and visit with each other, that we became a group of friends that were able to call each other at night. We may disagree on things, but we listened and gave everyone else the dignity and the ideas that could broaden us. Because what the Lyceum is really about besides having that unity of discussion, is how you think. How you think about something determines what you think about something. I remembered one time in one of the first books, someone asked me, they said, well, I asked them, I said, what'd you get out of the Lyceum? They said, go back to your first book. And the thing I took from it was a story about Buffy. It's an interesting little parallel because Buffy was my daughter that we used to go, or is my daughter, but she was about 6 or 7 years old when we would go oftentimes to Acapulco for the Princess Hotel. And being a good father, I'd gone, because Rainbow Bright was the doll of the time, I'd gone through 2 Toys R Us going through this area to try and find a Rainbow Bright. I found one. She was the happiest little girl you've ever seen. I gave it to her. She just hung on to it, hung on to it, hung on to it. So I was proud of myself. Everything goes. We get into Mexico. We're about to go through, as we're going through customs. Suddenly, Buffy is screaming as loud as she can. And I thought, she caught her finger in something. What is it? And I look, and on the far end of the turnstile where the luggage was coming out was a man who had Rainbow Bright. And I said, over here, over here. So he gives it to me. She's still screaming. We're leaving back in those days, Mexico go through every bag. So we're having it. She kept putting, where they had the things that slide down, putting Rainbow Bright up there. The lady would give it back to her. She'd scream full speed ahead. Well, she's usually very nicely tempered. So when we got out of that, I asked her, I said, Buffy, are you okay? What's wrong? And she said, Daddy, these are the meanest people I've ever seen. They're really mean. And I said, well, what you mean? She said, they wouldn't let Rainbow Bright ride the merry-go-round, nor would they let her go down the slide. Point being, at that point in time, that's how she saw the world. And it was you would think, well, with experience, I see it differently now. I am older. I see it, how she sees things. But at her age and her time and the information she had, she was a very smart little girl. She saw things differently, and she saw things from her part truthfully. Those of you that have watched on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, looks today that in many cases with the algorithms that look very much as to what we like, we are very much getting to be a little bit like Buffy, that we see a world only of what is presented to us. That show basically points out that what is sold by media is our time. And to obviously do the best economics, they have to have what pleases most. So if I have a chance to watch a movie that Netflix thinks is 99% what I like, why should I watch something that's 80% of what I like? But if I don't watch the 80%, how do I ever broaden from that 1% that I'm watching? That's where the Lyceum is very different. It is, as Laura and Casson call, the anti-logarithm. It tends to be something that has you come together to think. One of the things that we started and talked about, we began the Lyceum, was the great physicist Niels Bohr. He said that every man's mind is a model of the world, limited to his experiences and his knowledge. That what you have to do is expand it. So if you brought 12 additional great minds together and you had a mastermind, your model of the world was broadened greatly to have the concepts and ideas that shaped it from many different directions. That was very much the concept of the Lyceum. And what we learned as we went through it is that there are a lot of fundamental things you have to judge. Is a problem episodic of just one time, or is it systemic? Most problems are scarcity of resources, of funding. So the issue that answers scarcity is fairness. But fairness is different in all three of the great powers. Politically, fairness is equality. Economically, fairness is proportional by who put what money in and how much time in order that you keep incentives. Culturally, fairness is basically the golden rule. Would I do this or wish this done to me? So you begin to look at all of these different considerations, and you realize that knowledge alone is not wisdom. It takes values with that knowledge in order to try and make it into wisdom. The Lyceum has many of those principles built into its systems because what it wants to do is analyze and look at each of these things. Over the 30 years that we've kind of taken some of these concepts after the Lyceum, because the first 10 years were pretty well with the Lyceum, it ended up that you could have 4 triangles that are in the books. The first is the triangles of the forces. It's change, which is the only constant, and the status quo, which is the power of history, move forward. To balance those two out, interestingly, is the concept of dignity. Both dignity as the individual or dignity as a society. And you would say, why dignity? Because dignity determines whether there's revolution and whether there's change or whether there's acceptance. And if you look at the dignity determinants, it's the 3 powers: economics, politics, and culture. So understanding each of them and their impact is important. You can do that by looking at the methods of analysis, analytics, measurement, that basically takes prioritization, and trends, which give you an idea where things are headed or what the unintended consequences may be. But you end up, in the end, the last 3 triangles, with 3 cultures that determine a society. They're the rule of law, which is what we all agree among ourselves is going to be the final thing that we'll do. This is what we require of each other and enforce it. The second is a culture of obligation. The culture of the golden rule, of reciprocity, of the silver rule of Confucius, of basically, I will do this for you if you do it for me. And this is the peer pressure that we must have in society, the civility. It is the rule of civility among ourselves. The third great culture is the great culture of the religions and the culture of the great philosophers. It is the culture of compassion. It is where I do something because it is the right thing for me to do. And I have in my life refined myself from my own self-interest to the interest of other people. And in defining myself there, I have and I show compassion. The problem with societies is as they lose compassion in the individuals, they lose character. And that then goes to how we treat each other, civility and our obligations. It goes to our rule of law that we, in the end, are not really looking for justice as much as we have tons of regulation. The reason these ideas become important is that at the end of this basic decade, a lot of cycles are going to come together. There's a book written in 1997 by Mr. Howe that talked of the fourth turning. It talked about how character changed over about 80 years and 4 generations, and how at a certain point you had a deterioration in society. Something very similar is a new book that George Friedman has had on the storm before the calm. It talks about 2 cycles coming together at the end, the socioeconomic cycle of 60 years and the institutional political cycle of 80 years. All of these and a lot of other points of history will come to that final time point in the last of this decade. What we're beginning to see now within society is very indicative of that. And over time, I think it will only become amplified until a new set of ideas gets into place and we as a nation move forth. The question is, what are those ideas going to be? How well thought out are they? I thought the fourth turning ended at the end. One of the things it said, the most valuable thing you can have in this fourth turning is a reputation for integrity and a broad network of people of trust. That's what the Lyceum is all about, what it's designed to do. The times that are coming are going to be the times that the Lyceum can be most important. We are like field goal kickers. Many people said, well, for all the times you worked in your life, what would you basically point out? I said, the one thing I learned is a lot of times I tried to save the world didn't really want saving. And a lot of times I looked at history and I learned the lessons of history to try and see the problems. But the problem is, even though I saw the problems, and a lot of other people did, most of the people still wanted to create the problems anyway. So there's a time that crisis emerges. And usually at that point is when organizations like the Lyceum, that have the warrior's honor to explain and look at ideas and ideals, that believe and come from conscience, have the greatest opportunity. We did a lot of that in the 1980s when Texas had its crashes. Gib Lewis basically had us look with the Lyceum and putting his economic programs together. We've had different points in time that we've emerged. So this is an organization that has a destiny to it. It's lasted 40 years because it was able to bring people together and change with the times. Strength is important, intelligence is important, but adaptability is even more so. And basically, in learning the importance of ideals and ideals, this is an organization that I think will be critical in the future. I think for those of us that began it, we want to say thank you to all of you for what you do to continue it. We now have seen that the ideals have gone through long periods of time. The new leadership will have even more responsibilities in these difficult times. And the new directors, we hope, will find their 6 years ones that give them a lot to learn and give them an ability to make a number of friendships that will be life-lasting. The Lyceum is not the place that your service ends. It is where you refine it and where you build the wisdom to carry it forth. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Skipper. You set the bar high for us, and we appreciate your ongoing engagement and stewardship of the Lyceum. It has certainly enriched my life. It is a Lyceum tradition to have a speaker who knows our incoming president well to join us in the investiture ceremony. And this afternoon, Dr. Michael Weber, the Chief Science and Technology Officer at NG, and the Josie Centennial Professor in Energy Resources at UT Austin, is here to help us honor Caslin. This is Dr. Weber. Thank you.
I love your clapping. I haven't even said anything yet. It's very different than teaching class at UT, where even if you do say something, they certainly won't clap. So I appreciate this opportunity. Appreciate the invocation and the pledge by Jennifer and Sarah, and the introduction, Laura. And Skipper, great comments. I loved hearing some names I recognize, like Niels Bohr, a great scientist, who said that predictions are difficult, especially about the future. He's the one that coined that phrase that Yogi Berra made famous. And you also mentioned my former boss, George Kosmetsky, who created some institutions. I interned for him when I was a student at the University of Texas as an undergraduate at the Austin Technology Incubator, and I still work at the incubator today. So George Kosmetsky and other thought leaders created institutions, so we probably have a responsibility to create institutions, but also to propagate them wherever we can. So those are great remarks, and I appreciate hearing that history. I want to share a little bit about Caslin and then talk about why I think what you're doing is important. I've known Caslin for over a decade. I instantly, can you believe that? It's been over a decade now, just as a time marker. Instantly knew her as a different kind of student, right? She's just not another thoughtful, high performer student, although she was thoughtful and high performing. She was a little different because she mixed different academic backgrounds, right? Policy and sciences and business. She mixed different sectors with government and industry and geographies, though a Texan through and through, also had stints in Hong Kong and Washington, DC and this kind of thing. And I think that's key, that these differences, having a diversity of background or experience or interests, are important, and in particular, different outlooks on life are critical. I think perhaps we come at life a little bit differently. We might even vote differently, but we both share a passion for the importance of energy for our careers, but also the critical role that respectful discourse plays to foster a civil society, so we can have a passion for these shared interests. And it's with that view of her, by the way, then we ended up working together and worked on research. We've been in touch ever since. I say, with that view of her, I'm proud to be here today to witness her investiture as president, along with the new directors. What a great tradition and a great organization. And I would say that Caslin and the peers here at the Lyceum, all of you, are the kind of people we need to remind us to stay true to ideas and ideals, as you just heard, rather than political cage matches and point scoring. It's not about who's winning or losing, but which ideas are we moving towards. And I think that's really important. And for me, my background is really in science and engineering, and I think about the scientific process of one of continuous improvement. My obligation as a scientist is to build on what scientists before have learned and to add new fact and finding new knowledge to the future. That's what we have to do with discourse as well. We have to make it more of a process, not outcome driven. I can't start in science with the answer and then go backwards to figure out how to get that answer. And we shouldn't do that in society either. We shouldn't start with the answer, then figure out how to justify it. We should start with the process, the scientific method, and see where we end up. That's new fact and finding. And with discourse, we should start with the process of civil discourse and see where we end up. Too often we start with the answer and then argue to justify it. And I think there's a direction to this. There's a direction to science and there's a direction to civil discourse. And I really like that for what the Lyceum facilitates. So I also want to make one more comment about energy as an energy guy, and Caslin's an energy woman. She knows energy very well. Energy is a global opportunity that also presents global challenges, whether it's economic, environmental, or national security. And there's no way for us to solve our difficult energy problems without collaboration across region, language, culture, political party, and academic discipline. We have to collaborate across all these different aspects to make any progress. And I would say that's also true about other difficult factors like healthcare or cybersecurity or national security or foreign policy. We have to collaborate. There's no way to get there with just one idea or one solution. And that means we need to develop the ability to collaborate and to foster conversation. And I think that's just to double down on what you're saying, that the Lyceum's role will only grow. I know that the Lyceum means a lot to Caslin. She's talked about it a lot with me. We spent time hearing about it and discussing it when she was getting involved. I'm not surprised to see her throw herself into it, which is great. And I would say that we can expect to see her continue to invest a lot of effort and thought leadership into working with all of you. And I just say that when she does that, when all of you do this, when the new directors do this, all of us in Texas will benefit. So I just want to thank you for that and congratulate Caslin. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Weber. I appreciate your contributions today and then also to Caslin and the investments that you've made with her. My friendship and partnership with her has certainly been enriched by you, so thank you. Now to invest our new class of directors, the 2021 directors and president, please join me in welcoming Judge Don Willett of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit and a Texas Lyceum director from the class of 2004. I have a housekeeping question. Do we want the new directors to join us on the stage? Okay, well, you guys can start coming up now. Yeah.
I'll finish getting suited up while y'all make your way.
That sounds great.
Yeah. Thank you for that warm smattering of applause, by the way. I appreciate that. No. I don't need your pity applause.
Here. Yeah, just stand yourself. So, and Judge, you may know this, but this is only the third class of directors that we've actually invested. So we did the very first at the Capitol, last year at McLennan County Courthouse, and then this year at the JW Marriott. Yeah, so there's not a rich precedent or tradition around how we order this investiture of new directors.
Well, I'm delighted, and it's my really rich privilege to participate. I don't think we had an investiture back in '04 when I climbed aboard, so congratulations to all of you. If you would, raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name, do hereby pledge to serve as a loyal and faithful director of the Texas Lyceum, dedicate myself as a committed steward of the state of Texas. Develop myself and my fellow directors as the next generation of Texas leadership. If you flub the oath, a trap door will open beneath you. Engage in the understanding and deliberation of key policy issues facing Texas. Almost there. And display and encourage civility in all public discourse. Congratulations to the new directors.
So yeah, you guys can take your seats, but before you leave the room today, we'd like at the conclusion of the investiture for you to come back up and take a few more photos. And Dave Shaw, Brad Morrison, Sanjay Ram, will you come up here and join the new directors in a photo at the conclusion? Caslin and Sarah as well. Dave, Brad, and Sanjay are past chairs of the organization, and we'd just like to include you in that group photo. Judge, back to you.
All right, I'm now thrilled to administer the oath to the incoming president, Caslin Kennedy, so she can kick off her benevolent reign. Raise your right hand. I, Caslin Kennedy, do solemnly swear
I, Caslin Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully uphold the office of President of the Texas Lyceum
that I will faithfully uphold the office of President of the Texas Lyceum
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Texas Lyceum.
and will, to the best of my ability, preserve, protect, and defend the Texas Lyceum.
Be a faithful steward of Texas values
Be a faithful steward of Texas values
and will forever respect and safeguard all that the Texas Lyceum stands for.
and will forever protect and safeguard all that the Texas Lyceum stands for.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. This is different than what I expected for investiture, but we're going to chalk that up to the weird year we've all experienced. Nonetheless, a great ceremony. Thank you to Sarah Jackson, who has put in a tremendous amount of work in making today possible. Thank you to Sam, Mary Beth, Lauren for helping with all the logistics. As you guys can imagine, there were many things that changed many times. I think we were kicked out of 2 different venues over the course of this due to the pandemic. So thank you to the JW Marriott for letting us come here and do this. I want to recognize and thank Skipper so much for making the trip from Brenham to join us today and to share your thoughts. You've already been a great counselor to me, and as I embark on this role, and I thank you for that. I also want to thank Dr. Weber. Thank you for being here. He's played a very influential role in my development and my career, and I have tremendous respect for him. And I've learned a great deal from him, not only with regard to energy, the industry that we both love, but the importance of critical thinking. I joined the Lyceum in 2015. I didn't know many people when I joined, and I remember early meetings being very intimidating. It was a close-knit group. They were all very smart, very accomplished. They seemed to have a lot of fun together, and they also seemed to be very close. I wanted to be a part of that, and I committed early on in my directorship to be open-minded, curious, and engaged. Over the course of my time with the organization, I've learned from incredible speakers and conversations. I've been on wonderful trips all across our great state, many amazing behind-the-scenes tours, I've traveled to small towns and metroplexes across the state and studied topics far outside my area of expertise, including healthcare, immigration, prisons, and human trafficking, to name a few. I learned things I would have otherwise not been exposed to and was challenged to think about things differently. And along the way, I made some wonderful friends. In many cases, friends that were very different from me and who felt very differently about important public policy issues facing Texas. In fact, that may be the most important part of the Lyceum, the connection. Connecting with people who are different and think differently with different experiences, getting to know them and respecting them and their story. It makes getting together to discuss policy and sometimes controversial policy and divisive solutions easier. I may disagree with you, but I know you. I know your spouse, your friends, your family. I know about some of the challenges you faced, and I have celebrated some of your greatest accomplishments alongside you. I may disagree with you, but I know you and I respect you. We live in a very divisive time, and there are many reasons for this, but I think the pandemic has to be right up there as one of the main reasons we have reached the level of division we have today. And it's not necessarily because we're tired or frustrated or scared. I think in the midst of the pandemic, we've been all of those things at some point, but it's because we're disconnected. Being together and connecting with other people is in direct conflict to our efforts to contain the virus. For the Lyceum, over the course of the last year and today, it means we have to work harder. We have to be very intentional. What we do as the Lyceum and our commitment to civil discourse is more important than ever. We have the opportunity to serve as an example, to be a different kind of algorithm. In his remarks, Skipper mentioned culture as one of the great powers. It shapes society and the way we think and interact with each other. Netflix, which Skipper also mentioned, seems to be a defining part of culture today. It has great content and the ease to watch what we want when we want, which I'm sure many of us have benefited from over the last few months. In addition to the Netflix film Skipper referenced, The Social Dilemma, there's another great show on Netflix that my husband Corey and I have thoroughly enjoyed over the last few months, Cobra Kai. It's an easygoing, binge-worthy series that, while a bit cheesy, has been a lot of fun to watch. As a child of the 80s, the movie Karate Kid was a formative film for my generation, and I'm sure many of you in the room. It's the story of a young boy, Danny Russo, an outsider, a true underdog who moves to a new neighborhood with his mom and is soon the target of bullies at his high school. He meets an older man, Mr. Miyagi, who quickly steps in as a mentor and teaches him the ancient ways of karate in order to defend himself. We all sympathize with Danny's story. We saw something in ourselves in him, in our own struggles, and we wanted him to triumph against the evils of Johnny in the Cobra Kai dojo, which he does in very dramatic fashion during a classic scene at the end of the movie in the Karate Championship finals with a swift crane kick to Johnny's face. Daniel was the protagonist and Johnny the antagonist in that film. As much as we loved rooting for Daniel, we also enjoyed watching Johnny seemingly get what he deserved. Enter the new series, Cobra Kai. Now in its third season, the television show shares a very different perspective. Is it possible that there was more to Johnny than we were told in the original film? The story takes place in present day. Danny and Johnny are now grown with kids of their own. Their rivalry has persisted, but it's more complicated and dynamic than the one-sided story we saw in the original movie. In Cobra Kai, it turns out both Danny and Johnny are the protagonists in their own stories. We learn more about Johnny, his past, his own challenges, And despite the guy he was in high school in the 1980s, we actually start to like him. Surprisingly, as the story unfolds, Danny and Johnny, despite their history and differences, realizes they do have some things in common. They love karate, but they also love their kids, and they love their community. As the story unfolds, they decide to leverage their commonalities for a common goal. I'm not going to spoil the show for those of you who haven't seen it. I'm sure you're on the edge of your seat. You do need to go watch it this weekend. But the truth is, people are complicated. Their views and their actions are informed by their experiences and their story. Here in Texas, we are an incredibly diverse state. People from all over, various backgrounds, various experiences. Lots of Johnnies, Dannys, and Caslins. We are the protagonists in our own story, and finding our common ground is key to moving us forward. This is the story of the Lyceum. I look forward to working with all of you on how we can find common ground for the future of Texas. To the new class, congratulations. And to the full board and our alumni, thank you for this tremendous honor.
Before we adjourn, we just have a quick special presentation to honor the leadership of the Lyceum. And before she adjourns, the now chairwoman, Laura Dixon, we want to say thank you. Many of the directors and alumni in this room and our friends know last year was far from typical, and the leadership and the skills and the resiliency and the innovation it took to build consensus and to continue moving this organization forward during a pandemic never before seen, took Herculean skills that Laura brought to this organization and kept us moving. And we are extremely grateful to you. And so for that, we would like to acknowledge you as our now chair of the organization, and to also say thank you, Laura Dixon. You have a very understated but very consensus strong leadership that is admired by many and inspiring to all. So thank you for all that you do. And with that,
You guys are sneaky. This is not on the agenda.
we'd like to honor you with this gavel for your time now as chair. One last thing we're gonna do. Laura doesn't know this is happening, by the way. She will be going home with the Russ Frank Award. This award is a Lyceum tradition, and it's given to directors who finish their 6-year term and miss not one meeting, perfect attendance at our age, which is quite impressive and rarely done. And so with that, we are happy to honor her. It has a monogram on here that says Laura Zoom Dixon, because she's the first president to have to implement the platform of Zoom to get things done. And with that, Caslin, if you would come back up here. I know you were all settled in your very nice looking N95, but we have to put our new president on the right footing for a great year ahead. As many of you know, the president of the Lyceum acts as like the CEO, and really the operations and all that happens in this year is with that person. And so we are excited for your presidency. This is I know it's not in the best, but is a proclamation from Governor Greg Abbott on the installation of your presidency. It's in here.
Awesome.
In addition to that, there are some traditional Lyceum items that go down to the president every year. These two, it's a Lyceum, Texas Lyceum brand. We also handed down to Caslin, as well as a gift from the organization and a gavel to her as well. And so with that, Caslin, congratulations. I've enjoyed working with you and look forward to working with you in the years ahead, all three of us, really. So thank you all for that. And then with that, I will kick it back over to Ms. Chairwoman Dixon to close us out. And then new directors, past chairs, please remember to come up here, please, for some pictures.
I think the last thing I need to do is adjourn the ceremony and then ask you new directors to come back to the podium. So I also have a special request for the class of 2015 because I see Zach Brady and Nicole Irvin and Caslin in the room. We never take a group photo. So before you guys get out of here, I want you to come up as well. And Corey, please, we want to get a picture with you and Caslin too. So, you know. Yeah. Corey Kennedy, the first gentleman. All right, we are adjourned. Yeah, thank you. Congratulations, President Kennedy.